Hello and welcome to another Daily Muppet. In today's video, I want to talk about Sir Jim Ratcliffe getting down to work in Manchester, the New York Stock Exchange vote, and where things stand in terms of the ratification. And then I would like to speak about the directorship role, the director of football, what may happen next, some of the summer plans that are being formed from a recruitment standpoint, the stadium talk, and more. So let's get into it. All right, so once again, before we get started, today's video is sponsored by SofaScore, and appreciate that they have sponsored us for all of this, and it's pretty cool. I'm working with them on things like lineups, targets, graphics, all of that. So hopefully in the coming months, I'll be able to put together some really nice videos and have a little bit more visuals to go along with, some of the names we might talk about, things like that. Maybe it'll help me produce something a little more interesting. But in the meantime, please use the QR code over there. Yes, over there. Or in the link in the description below if you are on your phone to download. It really helps us to show that to sponsors and things like that we have a lot of support. So thank you. And let's get right into it. New York Stock Exchange vote on Monday concluded with the pretty much as expected approval, which was always what was going to happen. It was viewed as a formality. The approval for the changes to the Article of Amendments, allowing Sir Jim Ratcliffe and the INEOS, or trawlers, however you want to put it from a legal structure standpoint, to purchase the Class B shares from the Glazers without them automatically converting, which of course is the whole point, gives him voting rights, and makes him the individual largest shareholder at United with the most individual influence and power. To be clear, because some people are asking, this does not carry forward into the future. The changes to the Articles of Amendment are for this specific deal as a part of it, as far as I understand, meaning future deals done the same way would require, once again, the same vote. But that is to be expected, and there wouldn't be any issues. If you looked at the vote itself from the Class A shareholders, despite what some people would have you believe, it was about a million. It was like a 99% yes with a very small percent no. The numbers are a little confusing, but I think it was something in the range of a million votes yes to a few 100,000 votes no, or something like that. I don't remember exactly how many people voted and what was on there, but it was a very close to unanimous yes, which is to be expected with these types of things. Some people have overcomplicated how this all works. It was a formality. It was always going to get approved. The next step, I believe, occurs today, wherein these Class A shareholders will choose to then accept Sir Jim Ratcliffe's tender offer for their shares, for 25% of their shares, and they will accept and will fill that order, sell those shares to him. He will then become legally the owner of the Class A shares. Still, the deal is held up by the Premier League ratification. However, it is a little bit of a funny business because the Premier League ratification was likely not to occur until the New York Stock Exchange ratification occurred this week, saying that, yes, it's all good and the structure of the deal is all fine from a legal standpoint in the New York Stock Exchange and among shareholders and all of that, which will open the door for the Premier League ratification, which will then actually finalize the deal and make the deal official, and not just now I forget the word for it. It's in the paper, in the documents and all of that, but it's essentially on a standby. It's sort of like in limbo. As soon as the Premier League ratifies, now it'll be official. So it's sort of like New York Stock Exchange. Now it's over to the Premier League. And it is expected that the Premier League is pretty close to ready to giving that ratification. It could come as soon as this week, that ratification. But some people will certainly know better than I on that. That's just what I've heard. But there's probably, I don't know, but I would assume there are English journalists that are going to have a pretty decent line to the Premier League on something like this, and hopefully we'll get a little bit of warning, that the ratification is coming Friday or something like that. But it could come as soon as this week, and we will hope that it does, following the New York Stock Exchange aspects of everything being settled. And so that's a good sign. Obviously, it means that everything is moving as planned, getting done, and Jim Ratcliffe and co. can get to work. I also brought on Monday evening the news that Jim Ratcliffe had flown into Manchester. He was actually there with Rob Nevin. Sir David Brailsford has been there and is sort of staying there pretty almost permanently at the moment. And he flew in. Rob Nevin is the chair of INEOS Sport. He's also going to be on the PLC board. So they were in there. I don't know if Rob Nevin was like around the club or doing some of the other things, but obviously making plans and starting to move ahead. Once it is ratified, which, as we said, is expected in the next few days, they want to get down to work on practically everything. So we'll cover some of that here shortly, including the stadium, which you're now seeing reports on, and that is based on some of those talks that occurred on Monday and some of what they were doing on Monday. So let's talk about the director of football. In last week's video, I brought the news that I'd heard that Paul Mitchell would not be a candidate. I always find this kind of funny. This is not a slight against journalists, but for a long time, Paul Mitchell was touted by many people, including people around The Athletic and elsewhere, as the top choice, myself included, and he was, depending on who you ask. And this is where it gets kind of funny about how these jobs work and who's making the decisions. I know for sure that INEOS were looking at him for it, but it is true then that David Ornstein said that he decided not to pursue this job. However, that was not always the case. He was considering it. And decided to go for a different job. But then it's one of those like, well, no, I was never really interested in that type of job thing. And perhaps they weren't intending to offer it to him at the end, as things have changed since Omar Barada's come in and all of that. Regardless, as I heard it, Paul Mitchell was not going to be an option. David Ornstein confirms that. It's kind of narrowing a little bit, but I think he said the same thing that I said, that it could be very much a surprise name. It could be a surprise name. It could be somebody from a bit outside the scope of things. And I still wouldn't be surprised on that. I wouldn't be surprised if it's Dougie Friedman. I wouldn't be surprised if somehow they, stumped up the money for Dan Ashworth, but I thought that was played down a little bit by some of them as well. So we're almost there. We are almost there. I can tell you that. We are very, very close to them wanting to name and appoint that director. And they're really just waiting for this Premier League ratification to occur. And I believe everybody knows it. One of the interesting things, however, is that, as I understand it, most of the people at United are pretty well not knowing what INEOS are planning to do in terms of these personnel. And that is understandable because, they don't want to, I know this quite personally, but they don't want to rock the boat too much with people who are already there while they're in the job. Of course. Why would you? I mean, Murtaugh's obviously aware of the situation and the likelihood that, he's going to get shifted to a different position at minimum. But it's still like you want some stability. You don't want to cause problems. And if you look at kind of the way that INEOS do business, if you look at Barada and all of that, they're not interested in talking too much. They're not interested in having things go out there. They like to do things, make a decision, and go for it. I mean, amazingly, if you look at the whole deal with the Glazers, 90% of media said that it was dead, that they weren't really talking, that they weren't involved, that they were stalled, that they were waiting. And quite literally, I think there were many times I was the only person who was able to point out that and have the news of what they were actually doing. And that is more an indication of just how absolutely silent they tend to operate. And I think it will be the same with this. I think that there are not people who know when it comes to the director, when it comes to manager, when it comes to all sorts of things. When it comes to transfers, that's a little bit different. So in the next few days, they're going to, well, as soon as the ratification occurs, which could be as soon as this week, they plan to move ahead with their plans on a director. And in terms of transfers, there is work already starting there. I believe some of it is probably, is certainly in alignment with INEOS as well. Obviously not at the moment technically driven by them, but there's a lot of work being done. We've already talked about the center back kind of overhaul, where there's a potential for departures of 3 center backs or more. And the names like Jared Braithwaite and Lenny Yoro, Antonio Silva, there's a lot of potential names there, and I wouldn't be surprised to see us bring in 2 center backs in the summer. In the midfield, it's the same story. I would not be surprised to see Casemiro depart. That has been on the cards. I wouldn't be surprised to see, as I've said this before, but Christian Eriksen go. It sounds like there may be interest from Turkey again in the summer. There may be interest from Brentford in the summer. There may be interest from others. And I think they could let him go. They're looking at a minimum of 2 midfielders there. And one of the things that I would say is I wouldn't be surprised. I wouldn't remove anything from the table at this point in time in terms of what they could do, what they could sell, and how they view this kind of fresh restart at United from a player's perspective. I'm not saying that, that there aren't untouchable players. They're not really going to be looking to sell, young, talented players who have 5+ years left of top end football. But if you're looking at the team and you look at anybody, I mean, even Bruno Fernandes, who's got a few years left on his contract, do you want to give him another? Is he someone at the end who's going to decline in the coming years? Do you let him go for free? I'm not saying he's going to be sold this summer, but do you let him go for free in 2 to 3 years? Or do you sell him while he still has a value, while he's still, not declined to nothing, and start to replace? If you look at clubs like Manchester City, Barcelona, Madrid, you kind of get the idea of what they would do and when they would sell. I don't know that that's this summer, but it might be next. And that's not a bad thing. It's just a part of keeping things fresh and running. But regardless, that's sort of the view that I've been told to take on this and to look at on this. Is that they really want to have a real fresh squad, and they really want to build a fresh squad, something that is for the long term over the next couple of years, and that will start this summer. So a minimum of 2 midfielders, in addition to that potentially 2 center backs, would be the main priority. And then, moving into the forwards positions, one of the things I wanted to say is that on Marcus Rashford is that, as I understand it, there has not been any recent contact with anybody regarding PSG, regarding replacing Mbappe, nothing like that. There's been no contact from PSG to Marcus Rashford, people around him recently, or anything. And that he's not, at the moment, looking to go anywhere. He doesn't want to leave. I don't believe that most people who are making the plans of the club want to leave. As I said before, there's some concerns if there are some people who are trying to push him out, but that is not in the direction of football people making football decisions, as I understand it. So I wouldn't expect them to leave. United will obviously be in the market for a forward this summer. Michael Olise being at near the top of the list, but you're looking at this injury issues that he continues to have, and that has to be a concern. He is young. Diogo Dalot, had back lots and lots of injuries over and over. Now you look, he's been incredibly fit recently. Very, very good. And a lot of times players grow out of those little muscle injuries, so that will be up to them to evaluate properly, and look at records and say, okay, is this a risk, or is this just something he's likely going to just grow out of, and we're not really worried about it for the long term. There's a lot of players like that. Neto at Wolves is the same issue, coming off serious injuries and things like that too. So it's something that will be difficult for United to evaluate, but They are very much looking there. So, at the moment, I'm looking at 2 center backs, 2 midfielders, and a right winger is probably like, if I was to say we would make 5 signings, that's what I would say. With the other positions a little interesting, the right back position, obviously, depending on what happens with Wan-Bissaka, but, he could, they could well keep him in the end and keep that rotation going. So, but that would be at the moment kind of the priorities. They're looking into lots of players. Again, once the director comes in, I do expect to start getting changes, but start to also get some names over the next 3-4 weeks, in addition to the names that have already been given or separate to. I know they're looking at different midfielders, and I'll have some stuff to share on that pretty soon as well. Moving on to the final point that I wanted to discuss in this video, which is the stadium. The initial plans, the initial look for was that, potentially just the expansion, right, of the stadium. And they've been looking into that, just adding seats and, obviously not wanting to get rid of Old Trafford. That being said, I know that, there's stories about potentially a new stadium. And I do know that there was a lot of consideration given to the concept of a new stadium during a lot of the thought process during and leading up to actually the whole takeover process. Because when they looked at it and evaluated the finances, what they're looking at was, of course, it's expensive, but the potential revenues that it can bring in can be a game changer. When you factor in FFP and all of that, you need to look for big revenue streams. The money the stadium brings in for Madrid, game changer. Makes it practically like they can do whatever they want. It's huge for Tottenham. And being able to have a stadium, I like they say in the Wembley of the North, whatever, where you can hold lots of events, where you can do lots of things, where you have a bigger capacity, where you have so much more to offer, it would, if done, bring in way more money on a regular ongoing basis than the cost of a loan, like a loan. So like Madrid, they have a loan for this big stadium. I think they've been able to basically pay it off early. They have so much revenue coming in. And that has been something they've been giving consideration to. And it sounds like it's something that they were discussing on this visit. And Monday, maybe visiting with officials in Manchester and all of that as well as the club, to figure out the best plan. I'm not a local, so I'm not going to put my opinion on the matter as to from a feeling, emotional perspective, whether it's a good thing or not, or whether I would support it or not. But I do understand it. Modern football, to be effective, to be the best, finances play a huge part in it. And having a massively improved and changed stadium that would allow for huge new revenue streams, sponsorships, and all of that, it makes sense. It's the right thing to do financially. So I can see it. I don't know what decision will be made. I don't think anybody does. But, INEOS aren't here for a quick fix. This is going to be their club. So if that's what they decide to do, and, that could leave a lasting legacy as well as what they do with the club for Jim Ratcliffe and his ownership. So let me know your thoughts on all this below. Hopefully by the end of the week on Friday. I was thinking about doing this video today. So I don't have a ton of information, but I could wait till tomorrow, but then maybe Friday things might be a little more exciting. There's a chance. So, yeah. So hopefully I'll make a video as well on Friday if there's stuff to talk about. Thank you for watching. Make sure to like, comment, subscribe, turn notifications on. Please download SofaScore for the best up-to-date score stats, things like that, to keep an eye on during and after games and all of that. So you can use the QR code or the link in the description below. Thank you for watching, and I'll see you later.